Hello, this is Ryan Sino, your host for Ohio State Primetime Live, and this is the National Signing Day show. This will not be quite as long as our normal shows, and it'll just be me today. Garrison was a little busy, so just here to give you a little quick recap of the 2025 recruiting class, what's happened so far and what you still might be looking for. And also talk a little bit about what Ryan Day had to say today about the class, as well as the result against Michigan. So let's first start with the 2025 recruiting class. So as of right now, most of the class has already signed, which is great news. A lot of the guys decided to go ahead and take early signing day as an opportunity to, make sure they were locked in with the Buckeyes. Obviously, this class is headlined by Tavian St. Clair, number 2 overall recruit in the class of 2025. He is a really solid player, someone that, should be the quarterback, maybe not next year, but in the years, maybe a couple years down the road. He's got all the physical tools. He's a big kid. He's from Ohio. He's a local kid. So, he's someone who can really be a person that can actually, help lead this team to big wins. So he's the headliner of the class. Obviously, there are a few guys who Ohio State was hoping to keep as well, guys that were being poached by other programs. And one of them, surprisingly, actually just signed a few minutes ago. That is linebacker Tarvos Alford. TJ Alford, he has been a guy that has been rumored over the last few weeks to be flipping to Miami. And a lot of the talk has been surrounded of him, flipping for Miami, maybe for some more NIL money, maybe for, the fact that Ohio State maybe wanted to go in a different direction. But in the end, Alford decided to go ahead and stay with the class. And, he signed. And that was one of the big guys that Ohio State wanted to keep from flipping. He is one of the guys that they really needed to keep to really have a great class. And actually, not only did they keep Alford, but they were able to flip a couple of guys as well. Another guy that just came in and signed not that long ago, really right after TJ got his stuff in, is a 4-star edge rusher from Southern California. His name is Epi Cicinelli, and he is actually coming in. He's a flip guy. Ohio State was able to flip him from UCLA. 4-star kid, like I said, out of Southern California. Really helpful to help build the depth on the defensive line, because this defensive line has not got a lot of depth because there have been misses in the last few recruiting classes. Larry Johnson hasn't been able to take a lot of they really haven't taken a lot of guys, and not all of that has been Larry Johnson's choosing. They were, it's something that has been a problem that they have now addressed. This class has several defensive linemen in it. Obviously, besides Centinelli, you have Zion Grady, who is another guy that there were rumors could end up flipping. He's from the state of Alabama. There were rumors that Auburn was going to be able to grab him, so it was really good to see him signed earlier today as well. Maxwell Roy is another defensive lineman in this class. He's more of a defensive tackle, but again, really glad to keep him. He wasn't really gonna flip, but you never know with these days with NIL. And Trajan Odom, another defensive lineman the Buckeyes went ahead and brought in. So, this class has got 4 defensive linemen in it right now. We're still waiting on Jarquez Carter, which there have been some concerns whether or not he's going to sign today. We'll see. If he does, that would end up being a 5 defensive lineman recruiting class, which is really something they needed to get. because, like I mentioned, they missed on the last few classes in terms of numbers. So adding more of that defensive line depth is something that they needed to do. So, as far as the defensive line, those are some really solid gets. Now, we can move on to one of the other flips that Ohio State was able to get. They were able to flip Anthony Rogers, four-star running back from the state of Alabama. They actually flipped him from Alabama. This had been rumored for a little bit. He was a guy who had visited Ohio State a couple times here in these last couple of weeks. And, it was a really good sign to be able to grab him and, you know, and flip him basically. It was really nice to be able to flip him. Here as you can see, he's a four-star kid from the state of Alabama. You know, Alabama really went after him hard. They had him for a while, and it's good to be able to have him, um, you know, with this squad. He's going to add some depth to the Ohio State backfield that really doesn't have a lot of depth behind Quinshon Judkins next year. So adding him was a big deal. Also, with this class, there was one kid who Ohio State was really hoping to keep, and they were not able to do so. That is five-star cornerback recruit, Nima Ford. And Ford ended up flipping to Oregon, which he was the big guy that everyone thought was going to flip. There were rumors it was going to be Auburn at first, and then Oregon went ahead and made a big push after that. So it was clear that a Ford, and this is despite many weeks of a Ford posting messages on social media saying how locked in he was with the Buckeyes. He wasn't going to let anyone sway him. It was clear that in the end he was using Ohio State for leverage to increase an NIL offer from either one of those schools. And now he's headed to Oregon. Normally, that would be a big blow, losing a five-star cornerback to another Big Ten school. Obviously not ideal, but they also did land the number one cornerback in the entire country in Devin Sanchez. And Devin Sanchez is from the state of Texas. So, like I mentioned, really, really solid player. He's been committed to the Buckeyes for quite a while. He has been, locked in since December. And since Ohio State was able to grab him, the blow of losing a Ford, it's something you can withstand. You obviously would have liked to keep both five-star cornerbacks together in the same class, had them grow together, make an impact together, and allow them to kind of run the backfield here in these next few years because, Denzel Burke's gone. Not that he was that, great this year anyway. Jordan Hancock will leave. There's some questions whether or not Davidson Igbinosun will leave or not. So, that defensive backfield is going to need some retooling. Having Sanchez back there certainly helps. Aaron Scott from last year's recruiting class, you still got Bryce West back there. So having these kids, come in, again, having both five-star corners would have been the ideal scenario. But, this is still perfectly fine to be able to keep them both. As far as the rest of the class goes, right now they've got 24 kids who have sent in their letter. They're still waiting on one more, Jarquez Carter. Again, he is the big one as far as commits that they have right now. But that isn't the last guy that they're looking to land. So there's been a late push from Ohio State to try to land five-star offensive lineman David Sanders Jr. And Sanders Jr. had, he visited for the IU game. There was a question whether or not he was going to visit. But he has been committed to Tennessee for a little bit. It's been since August. So he decided today to actually not go ahead and sign with anyone today. So Sanders Jr. is still on the board. In Ohio State is still trying to make a late push. He's the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. He's the number 5 overall recruit according to the composite. He's someone that Justin Fry and the Ohio State staff have been working very hard to flip and very hard to land in general. So there's a thought that, you know what? You lose a Ford. So there goes a 5-star recruit, 5-star talent. But now the money that they had that they were going to use with a Ford, they can go ahead and use that money to slide over to Sanders. And the offensive line is probably more of a need right now, as we saw against Michigan. The depth there is not great either. So adding a 5-star talent like Sanders would be great. Now, his recruitment's all over the place. There's been information out there saying that he's going to stick with Tennessee. And there's been some information out there that he's just using, Ohio State to try to drive up a higher offer from Tennessee. There's been some rumors that he's waiting to hold his press conference till tomorrow so we can make it a little bit more about him. But quite frankly, since there's information all over the place, I don't really know what to believe in general. We're going to have to wait and see what happens with him. But I do think it's a good sign that he went ahead and did not sign with Tennessee today, with the news that Josh Simmons is going to the NFL draft, which wasn't a big shock, but the fact that that news came out today, I don't think is a coincidence. I think that announcement was deliberate. So maybe that means they do land Sanders. As far as what the offensive line looks right now with this class, their best recruit is Carter Lowe, kid from Toledo. He's a 4-star recruit. He's a tackle. He's someone that the Buckeyes really wanted to get. He's been locked in for a while. He's been committed for several months now. He really committed back in January. He took an official visit back in June and really hasn't visited anyone else. He's an in-state kid that the Buckeyes really wanted to grab. Him, he and Luke Montgomery are probably the 2 highest rated recruits that Justin Fry has landed so far. Neither one of them being a 5-star kid, but Lowe is pretty close. So he's someone that the Buckeyes are extremely happy to get along the offensive line. Now, whether or not Sanders is going to be able to, whether or not Fry is going to be able to land Sanders will go a long way in figuring out his employment status following the conclusion of the college football playoff. Yes, the Ohio State offensive line had a lot of injuries this year, but, the depth along the offensive line is his fault. He has not been able to recruit at a high enough level to replace the guys who have been hurt with other guys that they trust can move the pocket or can move the line of scrimmage on run plays and protect the pocket. So, again, that all boils down to Justin Fry. So, if they can land David Sanders, I would say his job is safe. We'll see what happens in the next few days. And really, last part I want to hit about this class is, the receiving core. Brian Hartline seems to bring in some really solid players every single year. This year's no different. The only difference being he doesn't have a 5-star guy with this class, but, we already know Ohio State's got some 5-star kids right now. But in total, the Buckeyes signed 4 receivers with this class, the highest rated being Quincy Porter. Quincy Porter is a 4-star kid out of New Jersey. And he's actually a 5-star kid, according to some of the services out there. But, with the composite I like to use, he's a 4-star. He is from Bergen Catholic in New Jersey. And again, he's a guy who has been locked in with Ohio State for quite a while. Actually, Michigan tried to make a late run with him, and he rebuked him. So he's someone who has been, with the Buckeyes for a while. As you can see, he's been committed since June. Made a couple of official visits elsewhere, but ultimately decided to sign with the Buckeyes. And it's just because of what Brian Hartline brings to this program. He knows how to develop receivers. He knows how to make them first-round picks. And he is the best recruiter on this team, quite frankly. Ohio State needs him to keep recruiting at an elite level, and he is the best receiver in this class. Other receivers they got Bod Penn Miller from Mansfield, again, in-state kid, 4-star recruit, someone who they're excited about. They also got Dizzy Jones, who's also from the state of New Jersey, another 4-star guy. He's more of a slot guy. He's got some speed. He reminds me a little bit of Jackson Smith and Jigba. While not quite as refined as a route runner as JSN right now, he's still someone that can tear it up over the middle. And the last receiver for this class is Phillip Bell. He's a kid out of California. So another guy that UCLA Chip Kelly was able to recruit from his time out there in UCLA. You know, a lot of people thought initially he was going to go to USC, and he committed to Ohio State in August, and he locked in today as well. So those are the big storylines regarding the 2025 recruiting class as of right now. Again, still waiting on Jacquez Carter, still waiting on them potentially flipping David Sanders Jr., but that would be really nice. As far as what their class looks like in the overall rankings, unfortunately, it's not going to be the number one recruiting class that they had for a lot of the year. Right now, according to 247 Sports, it is rated as the 5th best recruiting class in the country. Losing to Ian before definitely hurt that overall recruiting ranking, helped kind of drive that down there behind Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and now Oregon. Oregon's made a late push for a lot of good kids. So, while it's not as good of a recruiting class as everyone was hoping for and what we thought it was going to be, this is still a really good class. It's still a top 5 class, and recruiting continues to be a strength with this program. Now, besides the recruiting class, that Ohio State was able to land today, the other thing that I'd like to talk about is Ryan Day's press conference, which he was there to talk about not just the recruits that were signing today, but also he was asked questions about the Michigan game. And those are the questions that I was more interested in hearing because, we know a lot about the recruits. We know what the class is going to look like. And this is the first time that he's spoken since the post-game press conference that he gave. And, in that press conference, he was asked about the play calling. He was asked specifically if he had more of a hand in the play calling than he had in games past, because as we know, Chip Kelly calls the plays. And while he really didn't answer the question because he wasn't going to throw anyone under the bus. He said that he taps in on both offense and defense on the headset to listen to what's going on. But he basically stopped short of saying, yeah, he went in there and called some plays. My opinion, what happened was that Chip Kelly was still the primary caller, but Ryan Day should have known better with the game. He should have done better with the game plan to make sure that some of the plays that were getting called weren't getting called. When asked about the advantage that he had on the outside compared to Michigan, he said, yeah, Will Howard actually threw it the second most times he had this year, so it wasn't for a lack of throwing the ball. So he basically made more excuses and talked about how they still needed to be the more physical team and still needed to run the football in order to win this game, which still doesn't make a whole lot of sense with the weapons that you have on the outside with Jeremiah Smith, Mecca Buka, Carnell Tate. And Michigan was down their best corner. Will Johnson was not playing in the game. The strength of their defense is the defensive line. So to keep trying to run through that brick wall really didn't make a whole lot of sense. Day didn't really, he really didn't address as to why they kept trying to run the ball. He just said, well, it's important to run. It's important to establish the run. And just kind of kept saying the same thing over and over. So that was disappointing to hear. He was also asked how the team is going to move forward and finish off the rest of the season. And Day said that they have no choice but to forget what happened on Saturday. They've got no choice but to move on because they still have an opportunity to win a national championship. And that is the most important thing for them moving forward. So he has said that while they are still crushed, they have to put it behind them, plague them in the game on Saturday against Michigan. One of the final questions that was asked of him, which I found one of the most intriguing questions, was, and I forget who asked it, might have been Tim May, it might have been Bill Rabinowitz, I don't remember. But someone asked him if he still thinks that he deserves to be the head coach of the team. And Day answered, yeah, you know what? I understand why you're asking that question. I mean, if I was in your position, I'd probably be asking the same question, but I do think I, still deserve to be here. Obviously there's no excuse for losing this particular matchup in the last 4 years. We've got no excuse, but we're going to keep on going. We're going to learn from it and we're going to move forward. So he has heard the outside noise. He understands what the meaning of a fourth straight loss means. And he was also asked if there was any talk during while recruits were getting ready to sign, if there was any worry about him not being next year. And Day said that is not something that ever came up, not something that anybody was particularly worried about. So it sounds like to him, he's keeping his job regardless of what's going on with the college football playoff and the results there. So, I still have some skepticism on that. I, sat here on Monday with Garrison and said they need to win the national championship. And if not, then he probably needs to be fired. So I don't, I do find it interesting that the loss didn't seem to really affect the end game of this recruiting class and, who ended up signing with Ohio State and who didn't. I think that's overall a good sign, but people have to remember if there is a coaching change, just like there was with Alabama at the end of the year, there is a 30-day window that opens and anyone can transfer. And that would open up the door for these recruits to also transfer if that were to happen. So obviously nothing's going to happen until the season's over anyway. So whether that's a first round loss in the CFP, or all the way around to a national championship, we'll have to see what happens. So, if anyone's got any comments here that they would like, to type in, hear me talk about here regarding either Ryan Day's press conference or the recruiting class, feel free. This is pretty much all I had for the agenda for this quick little podcast here today. Just wanted to give you guys kind of a rundown on what to expect from this recruiting class and what Ryan Day's reaction was during the press conference today. If I had to rank this recruiting class, I wouldn't say it's one of the top classes the Buckeyes have signed within the last few years. There are a few guys that I think will be big impact guys. I think Sanchez is probably the guy who's going to make the most impact. I really like his skills as a corner. I think he's one of those guys that can be a shutdown corner and someone that Ohio State can really lean on. It's hard. Tavian St. Clair's got all the physical traits. He didn't play at a big school up in Bellefontaine. Competition wasn't the greatest, so I'm not sure what to expect from him. Also, with the quarterback logjam that they've got going on right now with Julian Sand and Aaron Nolan there already. So it'll be interesting to see what the future holds at the quarterback position once this season is over. That battle is going to be very interesting next spring. This recruiting class they attacked some positions of need in terms of depth. Like I mentioned, they added a lot more defensive linemen. They got more offensive linemen. Would have liked to have seen them got a little some more. Would have liked to have seen them get some more impact offensive linemen. I mean, Cartelo's great, but you also have 2 3-star kids on the offensive line in this class, and you get the 1 4-star recruit there from Cartelo. So right now you're looking at 3 offensive linemen in the class. You'd like to see it at 4 or 5, considering the classes that they've had in the last couple of years. Now, if you land David Sanders Jr., that changes all of that. He changes the calculus of how good the offensive line can be. He's someone who they might be able to start day 1, in fact. So that could change things, so stay tuned on that. As far as other areas where I thought, maybe they could have improved at, well, losing a Ford certainly hurts. And now they only got 2 corners in this class, which, I would like to see 3. And I think that's what they were aiming for. So they really got Devin Sanchez, and they flipped Jordan Woods a few days ago. He's a corner from the state of Georgia. He was someone that they had kept their eyes on for, a while. He had been committed to Cincinnati, and then he flipped his commitment right before the Michigan game. So those are the only two corners. So would have liked to have seen a little bit more attention paid to cornerback. Other than that, I think this class is fairly solid. Like I mentioned, it's a top 5 class. I wish that they were a little bit stronger. But, we'll see. If they get David Sanders Jr., that would be a huge way to cap this class. And quite honestly, that would instill a lot of confidence that these kids aren't waning in the face that Ryan Day might be fired. They're more committed to the program than they are the coach, which I think is extremely important in this day and age. We'll see how the NIL shakes out. We'll see how, what kind of offer he would command, and we'll see whether or not he's just using Ohio State as leverage for a bigger bag from Tennessee. That is still a possibility. That's what a forward did today with Oregon. So again, Ohio State right now with the top 5, recruiting class. Seen some comments here about, Michigan with their NIL approach and what their class, the class is slowly approaching Ohio State. Their class has definitely gotten a lot better in the last couple of days. Right now, it's ranked 7th. They are, they have gained a lot of commits in the last couple of days based off of their approach to NIL. Ellison is a very rich guy, so having him as part of the program is a, important thing for that program to keep the recruiting strong. Michigan hasn't really been known for their recruiting in the past few years because they, Harbaugh really hasn't brought in the best recruiting classes, but what they've been able to do is coach the guys up and really, get the most out of them. And that's something Ohio State has failed to do. They have gotten the highly touted, highly recruited guys, but they haven't coached them up to even a higher potential. They haven't gotten the most out of them. That's what happened in the class of 2021. The seniors went 0-4 against Michigan, despite a lot of them being some of the most highly touted recruits in the country. So, they're slowly approaching there in recruiting class. I'm not that worried about that, though. I'm still, they went 6-5 this year, I guess 7-5 this year. So, until their coaching staff can prove that they can coach can coach more consistently in games that aren't the Ohio State game, I'll take them more seriously as a national title contender. But until Ryan Day can prove that he can beat Michigan, then I will assume that Ohio State is going to lose that game as long as he's still employed. So there's that. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to talk about the recruiting class, Ryan Day's reaction. So thank you, guys. We will be back tomorrow. Both me and Garrison will be together, and it will be the live call-in show. So be prepared to call in. Be prepared to have some comments. We'll take some time to talk about what you guys want to talk about. We'll recap this class a little bit, talk a little bit more about, what Sanders' next move might be, how the Ohio State football team should feel going into the first round of the college football playoff. And again, whatever you guys want to hear us talk about. So until tomorrow, we will be live at 8 o'clock tomorrow, and we'll see you guys then. So, OH, IO.